Good evening, my cherished friends. Tonight I want to give you something. Not a technique, not a method, not another layer of instruction to add to the stack of things you are already trying to do correctly. I want to give you a single quality, the one quality that separates those who manifest their desires with apparent ease from those who study manifestation faithfully, practice it diligently, and still find themselves returning year after year to the same unanswered questions and the same unfulfilled desires. That quality is naturalness, not excitement, not passion, not even faith in the sense most people mean when they use the word naturalness. The felt sense of complete, untroubled ordinariness about your desire being fulfilled. I want you to hold two men in your mind for a moment. The first has just won the lottery. He is shaking. He is calling people, his voice cracking, barely able to form sentences. He keeps saying, I can't believe it. I can't believe this is happening. He is experiencing something so far outside his normal sense of self that his entire nervous system is registering it as an emergency, a wonderful emergency, but an emergency nonetheless. His hands are unsteady. He cannot eat. The second man has been wealthy for 20 years. He checks his account the way you check the weather. He handles a large transaction with the same ease you handle ordering coffee. When someone mentions money around him, he does not lean forward with that particular hunger. He leans back. Wealth is not an event in his life. It is a condition of it like air, like gravity, simply present and unworthy of comment. One consciousness says, can you believe this is happening to me? The other consciousness says, without saying anything at all, of course. What else would be true? The first man is experiencing his desire. The second man is being his desire. And this distinction, as fine as it seems, as philosophical as it sounds, is the entire difference between the life that keeps slipping away and the life that simply stays. Because here is the law that most people never hear stated plainly. What feels natural to you must manifest. What feels unnatural, miraculous, astonishing, hard to believe will always tend to slip away, because the state that received it cannot hold it. The lottery winner's windfall was received by a consciousness that experienced it as extraordinary. And so it remained extraordinary, foreign to the self, and within a few years, as the research consistently shows, the money is gone. Not because of bad decisions, exactly. Because the consciousness that received the windfall was not the consciousness of wealth. It was the consciousness of someone to whom wealth was a visitation, not a home. Naturalness is the signature of permanence. What you have truly become in consciousness stays. What you temporarily experience without becoming passes. I noticed this principle years ago through simple observation, not of mystical experiences, but of the ordinary patterns of ordinary lives. Every person I have ever known has at least one area of their life where things are simply fine, where lack and struggle are genuinely foreign, where they don't wake up in the night wondering whether they still have it. For some, it is their intelligence. They do not lie awake questioning whether they are still smart. They do not check. They do not perform intelligence anxiously to reassure themselves. They simply are intelligent. And this naturalness means intelligence stays stable, grows organically, requires no maintenance. For others, it is their health, or their creativity, or their warmth with other people, or their capacity to find humor in difficulty. Whatever it is, wherever in your life you feel genuinely at home, that dimension is stable. Not because you work to maintain it, because you don't have to work, because it is simply what you are. Now notice the places you struggle. The relationship that keeps not quite working. The finances that are always a source of low-grade tension. The career that seems to resist your efforts at growth. The health that requires constant attention. In each of these areas, if you look honestly, you will find something consistent. You are trying to have these things rather than naturally being someone who has them. You are approaching them as problems to be solved rather than as your natural condition. And that quality of straining, of reaching, of trying to get to somewhere you do not currently feel you belong, that quality is itself the barrier, not your circumstances, not your past, not other people's decisions. Your relationship to the desire specifically, the fact that it feels special, extraordinary, not yet yours. A woman approached me after a lecture in Los Angeles, impeccably dressed, well spoken, someone who was clearly accomplished by any conventional measure. She sat down and said, I can manifest small things without any difficulty. Parking spaces, small synchronicities, minor opportunities, these happen almost every time I set my intention. But the things that actually matter, a genuinely fulfilling relationship, real financial freedom, the career I know I'm meant for, these don't come, no matter how much I imagine them. What am I missing? I asked her a simple question. When you imagine the parking space, how do you feel? She paused, slightly confused by the question. I don't know. I expect it to be there. It's nothing special. Exactly, I said. And when you imagine the relationship or the financial freedom? And I watched her change. The shift was physical and immediate. Her eyes widened. Her breath quickened. I feel excited, she said. Sometimes almost overwhelmingly excited. My heart speeds up. I think this would be everything. This would transform my life. There, I told her, is your answer. She manifests parking spaces because they feel completely natural to her. She expects them the way she expects the sidewalk to be solid beneath her feet. There is no charge on it, no drama, no elevation of the ordinary into the miraculous. And so they appear. She does not manifest the larger desires not because they are harder, not because the universe discriminates between parking spaces and partnerships, but because she is treating them differently. She is holding them in a state of excited non-possession. She is broadcasting, with every visualization, the felt experience of someone for whom this reality would be extraordinary, would be amazing, would be hard to believe. And the universe, reading that signal, delivers its faithful response, an experience that matches the state of someone for whom it hasn't happened yet. Are you saying I shouldn't be excited? She asked. Excitement is fine when a desire first arrives to you, I said. When you first glimpse the possibility, yes, feel the thrill of it. But if you are still excited about it after months of imagining it, you have not yet made it natural. You are still treating it as something that would be extraordinary if it happened. And that very quality, that awe, that this would be amazing, is precisely the feeling that keeps it from happening. The silence between us lasted a long time. This is perhaps the most misunderstood thing in all of manifestation, and I want to say it as plainly as I can. People believe that passion, excitement, and intense emotional energy are the engines of manifestation. They work themselves into elevated states. They feel overwhelming desire. They generate tremendous emotional charge. And then they wait and wonder why the desire hasn't appeared. Intense emotion can clarify what you want, but naturalness is what allows you to actually have it. There is a feeling tone to excitement that most people have never examined carefully. At its root, excitement says, this would be wonderful. And embedded in that would be is the assumption of absence. Excitement, as most people experience it in relation to their desires, is the feeling of someone who does not yet have something they very much want. It is charged with longing. It is lit by distance. Naturalness says something entirely different. It says, not in words, but in the quiet subtext of assumption, of course. This is simply what is. There is no charge, no distance, no gap between self and desire. The desire is not ahead of you, approaching. It is simply the atmosphere you inhabit. This is the quality you must cultivate, not to suppress emotion, but to deepen it, to take it past the electric surface of excitement into the settled ground of simple, untroubled having. A young man came to study with me who wanted to become a successful writer. He had genuine talent. I could see that clearly. He had discipline. He wrote every day without fail. He imagined his success every night, his name on bestseller lists, the reviews, the recognition. He generated real feeling in these imaginations. And year after year, the rejection letters came. One afternoon, he came to me with the specific frustration of someone who has done everything right and still cannot understand why it isn't working. Tell me, I said, how does a successful writer feel to you? His eyes lit up in the way that confirmed everything I suspected. Validated, accomplished, proven. It would feel like I had finally made it, like all the struggle had been worth something. I stopped him. That is your problem. He looked at me. You are imagining being a successful writer as something that would transform you, that would elevate you from what you currently are into something else, something better, something you can't quite believe you'd be allowed to become. To you, it is extraordinary, special, the culmination of a long proving of yourself. But it would be, he said. And that is precisely why it isn't, I replied. Let me ask you something else. How do you feel about your ability to read? He looked genuinely puzzled. I just read. I've always been able to read. It's nothing. Exactly. You don't imagine being able to read as a special gift. You don't wake up grateful for it in that charged, anxious way. You don't feel you need to prove it or defend it or pursue it. You simply read, because that is what you are. That is the feeling, that precise, unremarkable, undefended quality that you must cultivate about being a successful writer. I watched him struggling with this. But how can I feel natural about something I'm not yet? There, I said, is your second problem. You believe you are not yet a successful writer. But in consciousness, which is the only dimension where anything is first created, you can be a successful writer right now. Not trying to become one. Not hoping to be one someday. Being one, naturally, the way you are naturally a reader. I gave him a specific practice. For the next month, I said, stop imagining your success as a future event. Stop feeling the excitement of what it will be like when you finally make it. Instead, assume you have been a successful writer for years. And then, this is crucial, imagine the ordinariness of it. Imagine checking your sales figures the way you currently check the weather. Routinely, without drama, not particularly interested. Imagine book signings as simply part of a normal working week. Imagine interviews as mildly pleasant obligations. Make success feel familiar. Make it feel slightly boring. Make it feel so normal that its absence would be the strange thing. He stared at me. Make success feel boring? Natural, I clarified. The way your heartbeat is natural. The way reading is natural. Natural things don't require your attention and energy and focus to maintain their existence. They simply are. That is what you want success to feel like, so obviously and quietly yours that you barely think about it. Over the months that followed, I watched a transformation in this young man that was more subtle and more profound than anything dramatic could have been. He stopped talking about his dreams with that particular bright urgency that had always been present before. The breathlessness disappeared. The fire in the eyes quality of someone who desperately needs something to happen that faded and was replaced by something quieter and more solid. He began to carry himself the way a person carries themselves when they know who they are. Not performing confidence, simply occupying it. His writing changed not because he tried harder, but because he wrote from a different consciousness. The writing of someone who is proving something is different in quality from the writing of someone who is simply doing what they naturally do. One has an age of anxiety running through it, a desire to impress, to justify, to be enough. The other flows from a deeper, quieter place. His submissions changed. He sent his work out the way a craftsperson sends work to a client, with the natural expectation of someone who believes in what they're offering, without the fragile hopefulness of someone waiting to find out if they are acceptable. Within 6 months, he had his first book deal. Within 2 years, 3 published books. But here is the detail I want you to notice most carefully. By the time the success arrived physically, he was not surprised. He was not jumping, calling people with a cracking voice, barely able to believe it. He received the news the way you receive information about something you already knew. Of course, the feeling was not joy exactly, or not the sharp, electric joy of the unexpected. It was something quieter, something that felt, to use the only accurate word, right, inevitable. Simply the outer world catching up with what had already been true inside. That is how you know naturalness has been genuinely achieved. Not when you feel excited about your manifestation, but when you feel that its arrival was obvious. When you think, naturally, that this is simply who you are and how things are for you. How do you cultivate this quality? The first thing to understand is where naturalness actually comes from. Naturalness is the feeling of familiarity. Things feel natural when they are familiar, when you have encountered them so many times that they have become simply part of the texture of your experience. Your ability to read is natural because you have read thousands of times. Your sense of your own intelligence is natural because you have been intelligent your entire life and the evidence has accumulated into the background assumption of your existence. The way to make your desires feel natural is therefore, at its root, simple. Make them familiar. Imagine your desire fulfilled not once, not in one glorious, charged, dramatic act of visualization. Imagine it repeatedly, consistently, until the charge begins to drain away, until the thrill of the new fades into the comfort of the familiar, until the scene is no longer exciting because it is no longer surprising, until you know it so well you could navigate it with your eyes closed. This is the specific arc I want you to understand. When you first imagine a desire fulfilled, the imagination is thrilling. The details seem precious. Everything feels significant. This is natural. You are encountering something new in consciousness, and newness carries charge. But if you return to the same scene night after night, something begins to happen. The thrill fades slightly. The scene becomes familiar. The details stop feeling remarkable and start feeling simply like details. Most people interpret this as a problem. The feeling is fading. My manifestation must be weakening. So they try to manufacture the excitement again, to refresh the charge, to make it feel special once more. But this is precisely backward. The fading of excitement is not the weakening of the practice. It is the practice working. The charge draining away is naturalness beginning to arrive. The scene becoming familiar, routine, almost ordinary. That is exactly the destination. That is the state from which manifestation flows most powerfully and most irreversibly. Keep going past the excitement. Keep imagining until the desire feels not like a future event you are trying to pull toward you, but like a simple fact about your life. Think about something you currently have that you once desperately wanted. Perhaps your home, if you own one. Perhaps your partner. Perhaps the job or the career or the recognition that, at some earlier point in your life, seemed so far away you weren't sure you'd reach it. Remember how you felt when you first got it, the incredulity of it, the I can't believe this is mine, the way you kept noticing it, kept feeling a small jolt of happy surprise, the specialness of it. And now it is simply your home, your relationship, your work. It is familiar to the point of invisibility. You do not wake up every morning marveling at it. You inhabit it the way you inhabit your own body, without drama, without gratitude of the charged, effortful kind, simply as the background condition of your life. That is naturalness. And that is the precise quality you want to cultivate about your desires before they manifest physically. The quality that your present circumstances already have. The quality of simply, unremarkably belonging to your life. A businessman told me he wanted to grow his small company into a major enterprise. But whenever he imagined this, he felt a combination of overwhelming excitement and barely concealed disbelief. It feels too big, he told me. Every time I imagine running a major company, I feel like I'm pretending to be someone I'm not. I said to him, stop imagining the drama of expansion. Stop imagining the moment things change. Instead, imagine the absolute ordinariness of having already arrived. Imagine answering emails, I told him. Imagine attending a routine meeting. Imagine making a decision that any large company owner makes on any given Tuesday. Not a significant decision, not a pivotal one, just an ordinary one. Imagine the complete unremarkableness of it. Imagine it until running a major company feels so natural to you that you can barely remember when it felt impossible. He found this difficult at first. His mind wanted the excitement, the drama, the peak moment of recognition. The imagination naturally reaches for the highlights. I insisted on the opposite. Find the Tuesday afternoon. Find the routine email. Find the most unremarkable possible moment of your fulfilled desire and live there. Night after night, he returned to the ordinary scenes of running a company he fully inhabited. Gradually, not all at once, but gradually what had felt impossible began to feel possible. What had felt extraordinary began to feel simply like a life. What had felt like pretending began to feel like remembering. Within 18 months, his small company had become the major enterprise he had been imagining. And when it happened, he told me, the strange thing is, I can barely remember when this felt unusual. Now it just feels like who I am. Now I want to give you a specific technique, deceptively simple, utterly powerful. I call it the boring technique. The name does not flatter it, but it is accurate. Take your desire, whatever it is, however large, and instead of imagining the peak moment of receiving it, find the most ordinary possible moment of having it. If you desire financial freedom, do not imagine a windfall. Imagine glancing at your bank balance on a Thursday morning with the mild, untroubled interest of someone checking the weather. Imagine paying a bill simply, without the contraction of anxiety that currently accompanies that act. Imagine making a purchase without checking the price, not from recklessness, but from the quiet background assumption that the resources are there, as they always are. If you desire love, do not imagine the proposal or the first kiss or the moment of recognition. Imagine a quiet evening doing something entirely unremarkable with someone who loves you. Imagine the specific ordinariness of being known, the Tuesday evening quality of a relationship that has been real long enough to be fully comfortable. If you desire creative success, do not imagine the award or the applause or the review that changes everything. Imagine a regular working day, doing what you love, it being simply what you do expected, natural, not particularly dramatic. The more ordinary the scene, the more powerful the practice. Ordinariness is naturalness, and naturalness, as I have been telling you all evening, is what allows the desire to arrive and to stay. I want to tell you about a woman who wanted to move from a small apartment to a house by the ocean. By every conventional measure, this was unrealistic. Her income was modest. She had no savings for a down payment. The properties she had in mind were expensive. If she had asked most people around her whether this was achievable, they would have been kind and honest in the same breath, which is to say, discouraging. But she understood naturalness. She did not imagine a dramatic windfall. She did not imagine the moment she received the keys, or the first morning she woke up and saw the water. She found something smaller and more powerful than any of those scenes. She imagined making coffee in the morning and glancing at the ocean. That was the whole scene. No drama, no specialness, just the small, unremarkable act of making coffee and the ocean visible through the window, and the complete ordinariness of this being simply her life. She returned to this scene every morning for months. She told me that eventually it became so familiar that there were mornings groggy, half awake, before full consciousness arrived, when she would expect to see the ocean. When the apartment window would register for a brief moment as wrong, as not what should be there. That is the moment you are aiming for. When the imagined reality is more familiar to your consciousness than your current physical surroundings. Within a year, through a sequence of events that seemed remarkable to everyone watching but felt entirely natural to her, she was living in that house. When I visited her there, I watched her make coffee and glance at the ocean with the specific quality of someone who has been doing something for decades. Easy, unhurried, simply herself in her natural habitat. The strange thing, she told me, smiling, is that I can't remember when this felt unusual. It just feels like where I've always belonged. I want to address something directly, because it will arise for many of you. Someone will ask, isn't this a form of denial? If I pretend something is natural when it currently isn't, am I not lying to myself about my circumstances? This question reveals a confusion about what naturalness actually is. Naturalness is not a claim about your physical circumstances. It is a quality of your consciousness. And your consciousness, unlike your bank account, is not subject to external audit. It is the creative ground from which your circumstances will eventually arise. Before you learn to read, reading felt unnatural, foreign, impossible, something that other people could do, but that you could not quite access. But there were already people for whom reading was completely natural. Their naturalness was not a denial of your current inability. It was simply a description of their consciousness. Now, reading is natural to you. Has reading itself changed? No. Your consciousness of reading has changed. The naturalness was always available. It was simply a matter of your consciousness arriving at the place where it belonged. Your desire is the same. It feels unnatural now, not because it is foreign to the universe, but because your consciousness has not yet made it home. The work of naturalness is the work of bringing your consciousness home to what is already possible, what is in the only dimension that ultimately matters, already yours. This is not denial of reality. It is recognition of the only reality that is truly real. Let me say one more thing about naturalness, because I think it is the most practically useful thing I can offer you. Naturalness changes your relationship to waiting. When you are desperately hoping for something to happen, time has a particular quality. Each day that passes without evidence is a small accumulation of discouragement. You check for signs. You analyze your practice. You wonder what you are doing wrong. The waiting itself becomes a form of suffering, because every day of waiting is a day of confirming, very quietly, that the desire has not yet arrived. But when something is natural to you, when it is simply what is, in consciousness, the relationship to time is completely different. You do not anxiously wait for the sun to rise. You know it will rise, and you go about your day, and it rises. You do not desperately check for signs of spring during winter. You know spring is the nature of things, and it arrives as it always does, without requiring your anxious monitoring. When your desire has become natural to you in consciousness, you relate to its physical manifestation the way you relate to the sun rising, not desperately, not hopefully, not with the fragile, checking quality of someone who is afraid it might not come, but with the calm, settled knowing of someone for whom this is simply how things are. And this quality, this absence of anxious waiting, is itself profoundly creative, because the universe reads your states, not your words. And the state of someone who is not desperately waiting is the state of someone who already has, which is the state that manifests. Tonight, I want to leave you with a single, precise invitation. Examine your desires, not all of them at once, but the ones that matter most, the ones you have been carrying for a long time, the ones that still feel electric with wanting, still carry that specific quality of ache and hope, still feel like they would be miraculous if they happened. Those are the desires that need naturalness most urgently. And the path to naturalness is the same in every case. Find the most ordinary possible moment of your desire fulfilled, the Tuesday afternoon version, the morning routine version, the so familiar you barely notice it version. And return to it, not once in a dramatic act of imagination, but night after night, until the thrill gives way to familiarity, until familiarity gives way to assumption, until assumption settles into the quiet ground of simply knowing. Make it boring, make it routine, make it as unremarkable as your heartbeat. Because when your desire becomes so natural in consciousness that its absence would be the strange thing, when you would notice the lack of it, the way you'd notice the sudden absence of your heartbeat, that is when it manifests. Not through force, not through desperation, not through the intensity of wanting, but through the irresistible, quiet, unargued power of what simply is. The feeling of course, the feeling of naturally, the feeling of what else would be true. Cultivate this. Make it your home. Dwell in it as your permanent residence. And watch as what you once strained toward simply becomes, without drama and without announcement, the obvious and ordinary truth of your life. Thank you, my cherished friends. Until we meet again, assume your greatness, not as a future possibility, as your present, natural, unremarkable condition. Good evening. This is Never Lectures. I'll see you again in the next video.